The chair of the Senate Taxes Committee, Senator Julianne Ortman, joins me now to talk a little bit about the budget forecast and some of the impacts. Thank you for joining us on Capitol Report.
Always good to be here.
Senator, let's begin with something that you stated in the post-announcement newscasts, that the forecast, in your opinion, is one measure of how the economy is doing. So in your opinion, is it the greatest measure?
Well, it's an important one for us here as policymakers at the state capitol. It says, how are we doing with managing our budget? And for us, this says that our fiscal controls are working. We had a mandate in the last election to come to the state capitol and resolve that $5.2 billion deficit without raising taxes. Now, with what we've heard today, we've actually turned what was a deficit into a surplus, a $1.1 billion surplus for the state. It's dedicated money, so first it's going to be used to pay for cash flow, for a reserve account, and now we have news that we can distribute $300 million in repayments to the schools on that school shift from last year. So this is very good news. It's a positive outcome after the 5.2 deficit.
TFL leaders and the governor did say that the GOP plan essentially had nothing to do with this budget impact and that a majority of the savings came from the early buy-in to Medicaid. It's fair to say that you're going to disagree with that assessment.
Yep.
So which policies do you think did have the greatest impact?
Well, I think you should look at it this way. Governor Dayton proposed a $39 billion budget with a $3 billion tax increase to Minnesotans to pay for it. At the end of the day, after the shutdown and all the negotiations, we adopted a budget that spent $35 billion. And so what you're seeing here is actually a $600 million reduction in state spending from the last biennium. So we've reduced state government spending. We didn't increase taxes. We adopted a budget that is $35 billion instead of the $39 billion. So I think it's a very measurable improvement in the state's budget and its economy.
Let's look ahead a little bit. If the various shifts are incorporated into the final numbers, the deficit for the next biennium is roughly $4 billion. So is this a time, in your opinion, where corporate taxes should be cut?
Well, let me take that in several parts there.
Okay.
Because there's a big assumption that that shift is part of our structural deficit. There's no question that we're going to pay back those schools. But even before the GOP-led Senate and House started managing the budget, there was never a plan to repay back that school shift. Now we have one. We've found a way to pay it back. This first $300 million is almost half of what we borrowed for this biennium. So we have a plan to pay that back. The structural deficit actually is about $1.1 billion. That school shift has never really been included in the school shift. So let's start with that piece. And I don't think there's anybody at the Capitol with a proposal to cut corporate income taxes. There is a plan to reduce the state general levy, the state business property tax. That's a very different tax. So all businesses pay it, whether they're small or large, whether they're losing money or actually making a lot of money. They're in Main Street, Minnesota. They're in big cities in Minnesota. And about 30% of our businesses' property taxes are actually paid to the state. That's new since 2001. And we don't want the state to be in the business of raising property taxes. That should be for our local government partners. So it's not about corporate income taxes. We're talking about business property tax.
Right. Thanks for the clarification.
And that's actually a jobs plan for us. Because when these small businesses and large businesses keep more of their money, they can invest it in research and development, in new jobs, in wage increases, in bonuses, in capital equipment. It's all going to turn into economic activity in those communities where our businesses are actually premised. That's the basis of their property tax. So when they save that money, now they've got an opportunity to put it to good use instead of sending it to the state just for more general fund spending.
So aside from the corporate property tax,
business property tax,
thank you. Aside from that, eventual phasing out, what other kind of reforms would you advocate, given that Commissioner Showalter did caution, again, that long-term structural reform is needed to try to curb the volatility?
Well, I totally agree that long-term reform is what Minnesotans are looking for, and that's why we're looking for that repeal of the state business property tax. Because when the business owners can see that the state has a plan, they're much more likely to invest here or expand here. We're likely to be able to recruit more businesses here in Minnesota.
Are there other tax measures that you would support?
There are. That's one of them. We're also looking at the marriage penalty. Minnesotans might know that in 2011, you don't have to pay a penalty if you're married in the federal taxation, but if you have to add income back into your state liability, $1,950 if you happen to be married. We passed that provision last year so that Minnesotans would not have that penalty. The governor vetoed it. He also vetoed our proposal to eliminate the state general levy. So we're working with him to see what our priorities are and why. We also have a proposal for a military pay subtraction, because I've learned from the Federal Reserve of all groups, they've taught me that when we bring military folks back into Minnesota, they bring all those high-tech skills, they bring leadership, they can be our new CEOs, they can bring an awful lot into our business climate that we need, and they'll bring their families, and that will be economic development. So I think those are three really big portions of the work that we're trying to accomplish in the Tax Committee.
Okay, Madam Chair, I want to end with the same question that I began with Commissioner Showalter. What message do you think Minnesotans should take from Wednesday's announcement?
We are going to stay the course. The economy is getting better, and I think we should credit the hard work of Minnesotans, families and businesses that are helping us to turn this around. We should have faith and keep working because we are getting results.
Senator Julianne Ortman, thank you for your perspective today. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.